Hi guys, welcome back from spring break. This is Mrs. Allgood again. We are here to talk about plant hormones today. So you will need your 11 by 17 note sheet that says 5 major plant hormones on it. And we're going to start on the side that says 5 major plant hormones, and I want you to find box number 1 in the upper left. Now, this is a lot of information. That's why I didn't want to do it the day before we left for spring break. And so I'm going to make your Google quiz on this. Of course, you can use your notes on it. I would suggest you do the review for it. But I'm giving you till Wednesday night to get it done. So you have plenty of time to let this sink in a little bit. All right, we're going to start off in box number 1. I want you to write the name auxin. Now, you've heard the name auxin before. This is not completely new to you. We talked about when we discussed apical buds, at the top of the plant, at the shoot, okay? The apical bud produces auxin, and auxin allows for a greater elongation of the stem, and it suppresses the axillary buds, which, remember, allow the plant to grow wider or grow more fuller. Okay, so auxin is also known as IAA, which is indole acetic acid. That's just another name for it. Where do we find it? Okay, not that where we find it is the biggest deal in the world, but hopefully where we find it kind of goes along with what it does. Okay, where we tend to find this is in the tips of roots and shoots, so your apical meristems. Remember we talked about the onion root tip and how you have you have an apical meristem down there, and then you have an apical meristem up near the apical bud, which is going to allow the plant to grow taller. You also find auxin in the endosperm and embryos of young seeds. So, a major function of auxin is that it stimulates stem elongation. Now, the kind of different thing about plant hormones is that sometimes a hormone can do one thing at one concentration, maybe something different at a different concentration, or there might be multiple hormones that aid in the same action. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways that you can review this before you take the Google Forms quiz. One is just going to be your plant hormone review sheet, but another one is going to be an analogy sort of thing that may help you think through this. So, auxin stimulates stem elongation when auxin concentration is in a given range. Now you think, where else have we heard about auxin? You heard about auxin when we talked about our tropisms. Remember, like phototropism, we said that when phototropism, that auxin collects on the shadier side of the stem and it triggers those cells to elongate faster. Okay, than the ones on the sunny side of the stem. So that's where you've heard about auxin before, in that it stimulates stem elongation. Okay, and I'll take a look at this graph with you. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Basically, at a low concentration of auxin, root cells might elongate, but stem cells don't. So the red line here in this graph is for roots. All right, at like a medium or normal concentration of auxin, your stem cells tend to elongate, but the elongation of root cells is going to be inhibited. And then at a very high concentration of auxin, okay, and so at a very high concentration of auxin, like up at this portion of the graph, elongation is going to be inhibited in both stems and roots because it's going to basically feel like it's under stress, and it's going to stimulate the release of ethylene. Okay, so normally, I know it depends on the auxin concentration, but normally we think of auxin as promoting stem elongation. Now, another thing that's kind of tricky about plant hormones is that they don't just do one thing. Okay, they tend to do several things. They tend to have several jobs. And sometimes they work in coordination with each other, okay, like a superhero and its sidekick. and sometimes they work in opposition to each other. So you're going to sort of see that as we go. All right, but first, the bottom left-hand corner, it says how. So this is a review. When we talked about phototropism and we say, well, how does it cause the plant to grow towards the light? This is how, okay? Remember, auxin is going to collect in the cells on the shadier side of the stem. And so when it does that, it stimulates proteins that pump H+ ions into the cell wall. That increased H+ concentration is going to activate certain enzymes that break the hydrogen bonds in the cellulose. And once you've broken those hydrogen bonds in the cellulose, that's going to allow the cell to swell with water and elongate. So that's just a review of what we did before spring break when we talked about the mechanism for how phototropism and the other tropisms can occur. All right, we're going to keep going. If I ever go too fast, just feel free to pause it. Okay, find your box number 2. It says important in. So like we just talked about, auxin is going to play an important role in phototropism, gravitropism, and thigmotropism. Okay, hold on. Let me get rid of all this stuff. Okay, guys. Sorry, I'm back. If I pause it, it means I'm probably having a coughing fit, just due to allergies. All right, one thing that auxin also helps do is to promote the growth and the development of fruit. So what does that mean? Well, a couple things. There's some plants that can develop fruit without being fertilized if they are sprayed with auxins. And that's something called parthenocarpy. Like maybe you've heard of parthenogenesis, which is where there's certain species of animals where the females can have babies even without fertilization from a male. That's called parthenogenesis. So apparently there's certain types of fruit that can develop even without fertilization if they're sprayed with auxin. Auxin, we know already, inhibits axillary bud growth. Remember, you'll find an axillary bud in like kind of the armpit, right? It's where a stem and a leaf comes out of the stem. That's where you'll find an axillary bud. The apical bud at the top of the plant produces auxin, and it will suppress axillary buds. So if you want a plant to grow fuller, you have to cut off the apical bud so that the axillary buds can grow. And then auxin inhibits leaf abscission. So what you're going to see a lot of in notes today is you're going to see a lot of, okay, it promotes this thing happening or it inhibits this other thing happening. And so a lot of times, like superheroes and villains, these plant hormones work in pairs. One is going to promote something happening, and one is typically going to inhibit something from happening. So inhibiting leaf abscission. Leaf abscission is when the petiole part of a leaf breaks off from the stem and causes the leaves to fall from the tree. Okay, that's leaf abscission. Okay, leaves falling. So auxin will prevent that from happening. Okay. Let's go to our second hormones. These are cytokinins. Okay. These are cytokinins. Where found? Cytokinins, you need to remember, are produced in the roots of the plant, but then they're transported elsewhere. That's key to their functioning. 1, they promote cell division and cytokinesis. That's pretty straightforward. They delay senescence. So what is senescence? Senescence has to do with the aging of the flowering and leaves. So if it delays senescence, it's helping to keep them fresh. Okay. When I think of the word senescence, I tend to think of the word senile. Okay, like when somebody goes senile, it means it's usually they're kind of old and they're losing it a little bit. So cytokinins are going to delay senescence. They're going to delay the aging of the flowers and the leaves. So if you've ever been given fresh cut flowers, you know that they usually come with that little packet of what looks like sugar, but we know it's not sugar. It's actually got some cytokinins in there. When you sprinkle that little packet in the vase full of water, that powder contains some cytokinins in it, and it's going to help your flowers to last longer. All right. We talked about how auxin inhibits axillary bud growth. Cytokinins promote axillary bud growth, so they're actually working in different directions. And so we say that the cytokinins weaken apical dominance. Okay? Now, the thing you have to remember is that auxin always trumps cytokinins. So if the axillary bud is present at the top of the plant, it's going to be producing auxin, and it's going to be suppressing the growth of the axillary buds. But if you were to cut off that apical bud, okay, that's going to now prevent auxin from being produced. And so the cytokinins can come up from the roots and promote the growth of the axillary buds, making your plant grow fuller and bushier like that. Okay, so you have this little picture in the lower right-hand corner of your sheet. Okay. So in the plant on the left, auxin being transported down the stem from the terminal bud or the apical bud promoted lengthwise growth, meaning allowing the plant to get taller, while inhibiting the axillary buds. In the plant on the right, that apical bud's been cut off, so the inhibitory effects of auxin have been removed, which allowed cytokinins to be transported up from the roots to activate the axillary buds, which would allow the plant to grow fuller. All right, so you're going to find box number 3 kind of in the middle of this side. This is your third plant hormone. These are gibberellins. We did hear about these the week before spring break when we talked about the steps of seed germination. So gibberellins are also called gibberellic acid. Where found? They're found in roots and young leaves and also apical meristems. Remember apical meristem? We want to think shoots and roots. Top of the shoots, bottom of the roots. Okay? So I'll explain my picture there in a second. I don't know, you don't have this picture on your page, but maybe you can make a note of it. It'll help you remember. So, functions of gibberellins. They stimulate cell elongation and cell division in stems. So when you see cell division and cell elongation, you should be thinking growth, okay? It's allowing our stems to get longer. And so you think, okay, well, we heard about another plant hormone today that did that. That was auxin, okay? So there can be more than one hormone that does the same action. Auxin is going to be the main hormone that promotes stem elongation, okay? Gibberellins is like a sidekick that helps auxin with stem elongation. So what is my example for this? Well, if you've ever watched SpongeBob, you know that this is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. So Mermaid Man is your main superhero, so that's going to be auxin. Notice it says auxin there. Auxin is going to be the main hormone that promotes stem elongation. And then the sidekick hormone that helps with stem elongation is going to be gibberellins. That's your sidekick. That's Barnacle Boy. All right. This is kind of neat. Gibberellins also influence fruit development. Like auxin, you can have gibberellin auxin sprays that can make apples and eggplants develop without fertilization. That's not the biggest deal here. This I have to explain a little bit. Gibberellins as a spray can be used in the production of seedless grapes. Okay, so let's see why we care about this. Remember when we talked about the steps of seed germination? Okay, gibberellins were being produced in the seeds, and so that gibberellins, when present, will help things like grapes grow larger and farther apart in a cluster because seeds have gibberellins in them. Okay, so this is the kind of grapes we're used to seeing. Okay, and this would be how small they would be if we did not use a gibberellin spray and they were seedless. So think of this kind of like seedless, untouched grapes. That's the way they would look. These would be seedless grapes sprayed with gibberellins. Okay, so basically the bottom line for this is seeds contain gibberellins in them. And gibberellins help the grapes to grow larger and farther apart, which people tend to prefer. So when they first started making seedless grapes, they said, oh, okay, well, we don't have the seeds anymore, and the seeds had the gibberellins in it. So when we don't have the seeds there, we don't have the gibberellins, and it makes the grapes a lot smaller and closer together, and people didn't like that as much. So then what scientists figured out they could do is they could spray young seedless grapes with a gibberellin solution, which would make them grow to their normal size and grow out a little bit more spread apart in the bunch. Okay. This is number 3. Okay. You don't have this picture. All you have to fill in is that it's important in seed germination and it allows the seed to break dormancy. Remember that if you just had a seed laying on your kitchen counter, it could stay there forever and ever and ever, okay? Until it imbibes water, until it takes in water, that embryo in the seed is not going to be active. So this, I didn't have you refill in these notes because we just did those the other day. But remember that when the seed takes in water, okay, the embryo takes in water and swells, and the embryo produces gibberellins that will diffuse across to this alurone layer, which is right inside the seed coat. And then in turn, the alurone layer is going to produce amylase enzymes that break down this starch in the endosperm, and that's going to provide nutrients for that growing embryo, which is going to allow that embryo to grow and rupture out of the seed coat. So we say that gibberellins are important in seed germination because they allow the seed to break dormancy. All right, so at this portion, we're going to flip our long sheet over, and we're going to look at our 2 hormones on the back, numbers 4 and 5, which are abscisic acid and ethylene. Okay, abscisic acid, it's one of those words that I have trouble spelling correctly. So if you see it spelled different ways, sorry, that's my fault. Of the 5 hormones that we're talking about today, this is the only inhibitory hormone. Okay, where it's found is going to be your leaves, stems, roots, and green fruits. Function. Again, this is an inhibitory hormone. So one thing that it's going to do is to prevent seed germination. And in doing so, it is promoting seed dormancy. So it is working in opposition to gibberellins. Okay, so I put this little part down there under your notes to explain why we would even care about abscisic acid. It says the seeds of the evening primrose and purple sand verbena remain dormant until a heavy rain washes ABA out of the seeds, allowing them to germinate. This ensures that the seeds won't germinate in unfavorable conditions, only to be killed off right away. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. In an area where maybe rainfall is not that common, they rely on a heavy rain to wash the abscisic acid out of the seeds, which basically tells the seedling that there's enough water for the seeds to be able to germinate. Okay, let's look at this. It is one of our 2 stress hormones. Ethylene, that we'll do next, is also a stress hormone, and it helps plants to withstand drought. That's the big thing that it helps prevent against, which makes sense with what we just talked about with those evening primrose and purple sand verbenas. So when the air is dry, the abscisic acid stimulates the closure of the stomata to prevent water loss by transpiration. And transpiration is going to be our big topic for notes tomorrow. Now you might think, well, where do we get the name abscisic acid from? Because I know you talked about leaf abscission before, meaning like when the leaf separates from the stem. Well, abscisic acid got its name because scientists used to think that it played a role in leaf abscission, in the plant losing its leaves. But it doesn't. The next hormone, ethylene, does. So it's kind of a misnomer. It really has nothing to do with leaf abscission or a plant losing its leaves. All right, last hormone here, but this is a big one. You'll see that there's a lot we want to say about this. This is ethylene. Now, just like we said, abscisic acid was our only inhibitory hormone. Ethylene is our only hormone that's a gas. Okay, that's what makes it different from all the others, and that does affect how it works. We definitely find ethylene being produced in the tissues of ripening fruits, and it also is present at the nodes of stems, which remember is like a node is where a leaf attaches. Okay, it promotes senescence. Okay, we had a hormone before that would delay senescence. Okay, that was the cytokinins. Remember we said that you have those little fresh cut flowers and you have the little packet of powder that would contain cytokinins in it that would help your fresh cut flowers last longer. So that was delaying senescence. That was the cytokinins. Ethylene promotes senescence or aging in plants. And it can do that in 2 ways. So first we're going to talk about fruit ripening and how it helps with that. All right, so let's talk about ethylene with fruit ripening. I think this is kind of interesting because this is something that applies to you in your everyday life. So let's see, this is under number 1, kind of on the middle of your page here. So a burst of ethylene gas signals fruit to ripen, and because it's a gas, it can spread easily from fruit to fruit. It also promotes the enzymatic breakdown of cell walls, which is going to help to soften the fruit. Okay, and that's part of ripening. When it softens too much, the fruit can become overripe. And it helps with the breakdown of starch into sugars, which is going to help to sweeten the fruit. The big thing is that ethylene is a gas. And so one of the big things is let's say that you had a banana that wasn't quite as ripe as you would like it. If you put it in like a paper bag with a ripened apple, okay, even the time it takes from when you leave the house in the morning till lunchtime, okay, that can be enough time for that the apple to release its ethylene gas to cause the banana to ripen a little bit more. If you've ever heard the expression, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch, okay, this is where that came from. Because ethylene's a gas, it spreads from fruit to fruit. And a rotting apple is a very rich source of ethylene. Okay, it's producing a lot of ethylene, so that fruit is ripening too much. Okay, so sometimes growers try to counteract the ripening actions of natural ethylene. So sometimes stored apples are flushed with CO2, which inhibits the actions of ethylene, which means if they picked apples in the fall and they wanted them to last a little bit longer, they could store them with constant supplies of CO2, which would help keep them fresh for longer. So this way, apples picked in the fall can be stored for sale the following winter, And wounding or bruising also causes an increase in ethylene production. That's why when you're picking your fruit out, you want to try to avoid picking fruit that is wounded or bruised, because it will cause more ethylene to be produced, which means the fruit will rot quicker. You don't have this slide. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this. I thought this was kind of interesting. It says that there are climacteric fruits and non-climacteric fruits. So if it's climacteric, it's going to continue ripening after being picked. And that means ethylene will speed up that ripening. So climacteric fruits include apples, apricots, avocados, bananas, cantaloupes, figs, guava, kiwi, mangoes, nectarines, peaches, plums, pears, and tomatoes. Non-climacteric fruits only will ripen while still attached to the plant. So those are things like cherries, grapes, limes, oranges, pineapples, and berries. Your strawberries, your blueberries, your blackberries, your raspberries. So if it's non-climacteric, what that means is that once you pick it, it's not going to ripen anymore. It says ripened fruits don't ship well. Bananas are usually picked when green and artificially ripened after shipment. To ripen the bananas, the company gases the unripe bananas with external gaseous ethylene, and then the bananas can ripen and then they can be sold. I'm not going to worry about that. All right. We said that ethylene promotes the aging of fruit and flowers. One way it does that is by promoting fruit ripening. Another way it does that is by promoting leaf abscission. Okay, so we had a hormone before that would inhibit leaf abscission. This is the one that promotes it. It's going to promote the leaves falling in the fall from your deciduous trees. And remember, the reason it does that, it prevents the deciduous trees from drying out in the winter when the roots can't get proper water because the ground is frozen. All right, let's see what else. Ethylene is also a stress hormone. It is a much broader stress hormone than abscisic acid. Abscisic acid really is only a stress hormone in response to drought, whereas ethylene is a stress hormone that responds to drought, flooding, mechanical pressure, injury, like a wounded or bruised fruit, and infection. It's also kind of interesting to note here that the production of ethylene helps form the hypocotyl hook, which is going to help some plants to break through the soil. We see that with dicots. And in general, ethylene inhibits stem elongation. So if you remember several slides ago, we used that analogy of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy for auxin and gibberellins as far as promoting stem elongation. And so ethylene is going to be sort of your villain that would be against stem elongation. Okay, this is not something you have to do. This is something that may help you to kind of get all these hormones straight in your head and help you to understand them a little bit better. So had we been in class, we would have done something like this, and my students usually like it. This is coming up with analogies for some of the different hormones and their actions. So for something like axillary bud growth, you might think of a superhero and a villain. So Superman is the superhero because it's going to be what promotes axillary bud growth. And so in this instance, it represents cytokinins because cytokinins promote axillary bud growth. So Superman in this analogy represents cytokinins. And then Lex Luthor, okay, is fighting Superman. So it's going to be auxin. It's going to be inhibiting axillary bud growth. And again, I didn't obviously draw that. I just got that from Google. So if you wanted to practice it this way, you can just do your regular old plant hormone review sheet. You have that. But if you want to set up something like this, okay, I just was missing two things at the bottom. Helps fruit grow larger, helps fruit to ripen. I didn't have any villains for that, just superheroes that promote it. But anyway, you can make something like this. And what did we just do? We did axillary bud growth. So this would be the real hormone. Okay. So here I would write cytokinins, and then my superhero, my analogy was Superman, and then the hormone that inhibited or delayed that was auxin, and my villain for that was Lex Luthor. Now, I don't have this already in your notes. I don't think I copied this page for you. And it's certainly not something that you have to do. But if you say, well, I don't know much about superheroes. Well, think of something in Star Wars. Think of Disney princesses and their villains. Mix it up, okay? What I will tell you is, sometimes auxin is a villain. Sometimes it's inhibiting something. Sometimes it's promoting something. So don't feel like auxin always has to be the same person. You can have auxin be over here and be somebody completely different. But anyway, that's just an idea for you. So don't worry about that. So what do we have to do? You have a plant hormone review sheet that I definitely would recommend that you do. If you want to do something like this superhero villain analogy to help you understand these, that's fine too. I'm going to make your Google quiz on this, and that will be posted on Monday. Please make sure that you did the secondary growth and stems quiz that was due before spring break. I also told you that there was no rush on the plant walk thing. That one's real easy. That's just watching a 17-minute video and writing down each of the 10 plants I talk about, and then you just have to tell me what those 10 plants were. That will take you all of about 3 minutes to do that, plus the 17 minutes to watch the quiz. Just please try and get that done soon. That would help me out. Thanks so much, guys. I miss you. Bye-bye.